My fiancé ditched me at the mall when I went into labor early, then went to a bachelor party with his buddies. He laughed that I could Uber myself to the hospital. 3 hours later he FaceTimed, terrified, and I never answered. I never expected my life to shatter in the span of a breath. One moment I was guiding Mark toward the parking deck, joking about how this baby would stay put until next week. The next moment a wave of pain hit so sudden and intense that I couldn't form words. I pressed my palm against my belly and sank to one knee on the rough concrete. Behind me the late afternoon sun slanted through the beams and lit the ground in sharp lines. I glanced up just as Mark dropped the gift bag at my feet. He stared down at me, face blank for a beat, then checked his watch and said, "I'll be late if I don't go now." He stepped back, earbuds looping over his ears, and began to walk away without another glance. My breath caught when I realized he wasn't coming back. The shopping bag lay half open beside me, colorful wrapping paper fluttering down like confetti from a party I would never attend. I tried to steady myself against the pillar, but the pain struck again, harder and unforgiving. I pulled out my phone with shaking fingers and called Shelby. She picked up before the call could even ring twice. I whispered, "It's happening now," and could barely make the words stick in my throat. She promised she was on her way. I watched Mark's silhouette fade toward the mall entrance, where a group of guys waited in a tight circle, laughter rising above the hum of passing cars. He lifted his phone to them and laughed back, then turned his attention to one of the men, arm slung over his shoulder as if nothing out of the ordinary had just happened. Seconds later the security guard appeared, tall and heavy with authority, and knelt beside me. He examined my pallor without speaking, reached for his radio, and called an ambulance. I lay back on the ground, sweat beating at my temples, and tried to focus on each breath. The guard pressed a cool cloth to my forehead while I texted Mark one last time. The message blinked undelivered for a moment, then went through. "You left me here. Come now." I stared at the screen as if willing him to show up. Behind me the guard's radio crackled with instructions. The wail of the siren grew louder until it felt lodged inside my skull. When the ambulance doors slid open the paramedics moved around me with clinical precision. One strapped an oxygen mask to my face while another slid a board under my back. They lifted me as a single unit and slid the stretcher into the vehicle. Inside I found Shelby already there, seatbelt clicked, eyes bright with urgency. She reached for my hand and squeezed it, hard enough to anchor me. The doors shut and we shot forward, the siren clawing at the air. I watched the city blur past the windows in streaks of neon and sky. The harsh red and blue lights pulsed inside the cabin and I tried to count my breaths, one through my nose, one through my mouth, until the rhythm steadied. At the hospital entrance, a nurse met us without a word and took the stretcher as though she'd done it 1,000 times. I passed through sliding doors into a corridor bathed in fluorescent light. Every echo of my feet on the floor felt amplified, each step a countdown to something I could not yet name. In the delivery room the air smelled of antiseptic and hope. The nurse helped me onto the bed and adjusted the monitors around my belly. I locked eyes with Shelby and nodded. No words were necessary. A few minutes later a doctor entered and asked me to breathe with him. I pressed my palms to the sides of the bed, took a deep breath, and let it out slowly. The pain built and folded back on itself until it felt as though my body would split open. My head dropped forward and then up as I rode the wave, guiding it, surrendering to it, until I could feel the pressure change. Then there was a moment of blinding quiet. The machines kept beeping but the air felt still. I heard a single, sharp cry that seemed to tear through the haze surrounding me and settled like fire in my arms. I reached down and felt something small and warm against my skin. I lifted my gaze and saw her face, eyes closed, body curled in a fragile shape that felt more powerful than the world. I whispered her name even though I could barely speak and laid her against my chest. Her breath was soft but certain, and in that silence I felt a truth bloom inside me. My phone buzzed again on the bedside table. I saw Mark's name flash on the screen, saw the number of missed calls rise. But I stayed where I was, watching her. This first moment was ours alone. Part 2. The hours after they wheeled me out of the delivery room passed in a blur of soft light and hushed footsteps. I lay in the postpartum ward, the hospital gown draped around me like a second skin, and watched Lily sleep in the bassinet beside the bed. Her breathing was steady, a gentle rise and fall against the thin mattress. My hand hovered over her tiny chest, afraid to press too hard and disrupt the fragile peace. Outside the window the sky shifted from pale blue to the pink of dusk. I realized I hadn't eaten or slept in more than 24 hours, but exhaustion felt distant, drowned out by the quiet insistence of new life. Shelby returned with a bag of snacks and a fresh cup of tea, setting them down on the table without breaking my gaze. She told me about the text Mark had sent, apologies tangled with excuses, promises to drive up as soon as he could, notes about how worried he was. She read them aloud in a neutral tone so I could decide whether to respond. I closed my eyes and pictured him reveling in neon lights only hours before, then imagined him at the hospital entrance now, hesitating. I let Shelby keep the phone. I didn't want to see his words again until I was ready. Later that evening a doctor visited to check on me and Lily. He lifted Lily into his arms for a quick examination, murmured observations about her reflexes and skin tone, and slid her back into my arms with a practiced ease. I asked about discharge and he said I could go home in 48 hours if all remained normal. His voice was calm, measured, as though he had delivered 1,000 babies before and knew exactly which questions new mothers asked. I nodded and felt a shift inside me, a subtle tightening of resolve. I would walk out of this hospital alone if I had to, but I would not walk away from Lily. That night I posted a photo of Lily on the group chat I shared with our friends and family. She wore a tiny hospital cap, her eyes closed, hands curled into fists near her face. The chat exploded with congratulatory messages, heart emojis, and virtual hugs. I scrolled through the flood of love, my thumb hovering over Mark's name which appeared faintly at the bottom of the list, no unread indicator beside it. I typed and deleted replies until I settled on a single line, "Welcome to the world, Lily Grace." The message sent, I lay back and watched the glow of my phone fade. The next morning I learned that Mark had finally driven to the hospital at 3 a.m. He hadn't called ahead or spoken to a nurse, he'd simply appeared at the entrance, eyes red, hair mussed as though he'd slept in his clothes. Security escorted him to the desk, where he asked for me without knowing my room number or even whether I was still here. When they found me and brought him in, he hovered in the doorway, words choking off at the back of his throat. He held out a bouquet of wilted roses and stared at Lily as though she were a ghost. I watched him through my own exhaustion, wondering which version of him had arrived. The frightened man who'd FaceTimed me from the club, or the one who had abandoned me when it mattered most. He knelt at the foot of my bed and touched Lily's hand as if to apologize for missing her debut. His voice trembled when he said he was sorry and that he wanted to be here for both of us. For a moment I felt the old softness that had drawn me to him, the hope that he would choose me again. Then I saw the hospital badge pinned crookedly to his shirt, the name tag of a bartender from his friend's bar, and remembered the way he'd laughed at my pain. I stood and placed Lily against my chest. Her weight settled me, grounding me in the truth I'd discovered on those cement cracks in the mall. I told him that I would raise her with love and strength, but I couldn't promise a place for him in her life until he showed he understood what family truly meant. His face drained of color, and for the first time I realized that my decision born in the midst of agony carried a quiet power. In the hall outside the room the light shifted again, and I knew that this was only the beginning of our story. Part 3. Morning light filtered through the curtains as I woke to Lily's soft stirring beside me. Her tiny hands reached for my face, and her weight against my arm felt both grounding and new. I sat up on the edge of the bed and watched Mark move awkwardly in the corner. He cleared his throat and tried to speak, but I held up a hand and waited for him to find the words I knew by heart. "I'm sorry." He took a breath and said he wanted to help, that he regretted every moment he missed. I nodded, but the words didn't land. Instead I rose, lifted Lily from the bassinet, and tucked her against my shoulder. I walked to the window, feeling the weight of our shared history settle behind me, and asked him to leave his things at the nurse's station before he went. He swallowed and glanced at the hospital gown I wore, then in silence turned and folded his hands at his sides. He placed a handful of clothes and a sports bag on the counter, avoided my eyes, and slipped out without another word. Nurses came and went with the afternoon shift, offering water and pain medication, adjusting Lily's swaddle for comfort. The room smelled faintly of disinfectant and warm blankets. I fed her from a bottle for the first time, marveling at how instinct found its way when calm returned. The rhythm of her suck and pause settled into a gentle pattern that eased the ache in my side. Shelby stopped by again and stayed close, asking if I needed anything, helping me decipher forms and pick out pediatricians. I found myself signing papers that felt like contracts for the rest of my life, each signature a promise to Lily that I would be both mother and father if I had to. When Shelby suggested I call a lawyer to discuss custody and support, I realized the decision was already made. I would fight for every part of her future. By the time discharge day arrived the room felt like a temporary stage we were ready to leave behind. I folded hospital blankets into neat rectangles and packed Lily's going home outfit into a tiny box. My hand lingered over Mark's duffel on the nurse's counter, but I reminded myself that charity without change was empty. I signed the final forms and slipped on my shoes, Lily swaddled in my arms. The hall outside buzzed with visitors and wheelchairs and the echo of rolling IV stands. I spotted my mother waiting by the elevator, her face soft with relief. She reached for Lily's hand and whispered congratulations. I managed a small smile and nodded, feeling the steady drum of purpose in my chest. The drive home was quieter than I expected. Lily slept curled against my shoulder while I steered through city streets, headlights tracing streaks of gold on wet asphalt. At home the nursery stood ready with pale walls and her crib waiting beneath a mobile of clouds. I set her down in the center of the room and watched her blink up at the pastel shapes. I thought of Mark in that parking deck, earbuds in place, walking away from everything we had built together. I thought of the security guard's voice, the ambulance's pulse, Lily's first cry. History had marked this as our turning point. I closed the door behind me and whispered a promise to Lily that I would build her a life unbroken by his absence. And as I turned on the soft lamp above her crib, I realized that every step forward from here would be guided by her small hand in mine. Part 4. The first morning after we settled in felt impossibly quiet. I lay beside Lily's crib on the floor, propping my head on one hand, and watched her fingers flex against the mesh side as the pale light sifted through the curtains. In that hush, I realized how much of myself I'd poured into every planursery colors, stroller models, the tiny nameprints I'd imagined only to have it all change in an instant. His absence had become the constant shadow behind every new beginning, but watching Lily stretch and yawn reminded me that life kept moving forward. I rose carefully, half afraid to disturb her, and picked her up. Her body fit in my arms like it had always belonged there, weight and warmth settling into me as if we were two parts of a whole. I carried her into the kitchen and set her in the infant seat while I poured milk and toasted bread. The steam from the kettle curled into the air and I thought how ordinary it all felt, ordinary and miraculous. Later, I walked us through the living room, past the bookshelf where I'd placed her first storybooks, past the empty side of the couch where Mark used to sit. I read aloud excerpts from Goodnight Moon, my voice quiet and steady, letting the simple rhythm guide me through the morning. Lily's eyes tracked mine as she sipped from the bottle, and I felt something loosen in my chest, the tight coil of worry giving way to a calm resolve. I sent a message to the lawyer. I'd like to schedule our next meeting. Then I deleted it before it sent. I realized I didn't need to rush legal papers to protect her future. I needed to carve out space in my own heart to believe in it first. We moved to the window seat, where I finger painted on a pad and Lily batted at the crayons, leaving streaks of color on my hand. I laughed aloud the first time I saw her try to taste a crayon, the sound low and sure, and felt the tension of the last weeks unspool around me. That afternoon, the doorbell rang. I set Lily down and stepped to the door with a calm I hadn't known I possessed. Standing there was Mark. He looked different, clean-shaven, jacket pulled tight, hands shoved in pockets. He asked if he could come in. I paused and glanced at Lily curled asleep in her swing behind me, her chest rising in the soft curve of unconsciousness. I thought of every moment he missed, the smile on her face when she tasted milk, the first time she rolled toward me, the way her fingers curled around mine when she woke in the night. I said nothing at first, then asked him if he'd seen her today. He hesitated, then shook his head and met my eyes. I stepped back and let him inside anyway, closing the door behind him. I didn't know what he intended, apologies or promises or something I couldn't yet imagine, but as he crossed the threshold, I felt the future press forward again, ready to test the boundaries of my new life. Part 5. Mark stepped across the threshold, his gaze flicking to Lily and her swing before coming back to me. I led him into the living room and sat on the edge of the sofa with Lily in my lap. He sank into the chair opposite us, fingers interlaced, eyes fixed on the carpet. I asked him how he pictured our life going forward now that he'd missed so much. He swallowed and said he didn't know, that he was terrified of breaking her already fragile world. I told him it wasn't just about showing up but understanding why he'd walked away in the first place. He nodded, voice quiet, and said he'd been afraid of the responsibility, afraid of the pain he saw for me that day in the mall, and afraid that he'd fail both of us. I listened without interrupting, feeling the weight of his confession settle between us. We spent the next hour in slow conversation. I asked him what he remembered from that afternoon and he admitted he remembered nothing beyond his own panic at being late. He said the guys had pounded on him to keep the party going, and he'd chosen the easy path, the one that felt safe until my panic call shattered his world. He looked at Lily then and watched her small chest rise and fall. I noticed his hand tremble when he reached out to brush a strand of hair from her face. I told him that trust would take time and consistency, that she needed more than apologies and regrets. He nodded again and said he'd stay, that he wanted to learn what it meant to be present. I handed him a small notebook I kept by the crib, where I'd written feeding times and diaper changes and little milestones. I told him he could write his own observations there if he truly wanted to be a part of her life. Over the next week, we fell into a new routine. Mark visited every morning before work, changing diapers and rocking Lily in the glider while I slept. He learned the warning signs of hunger and tiredness, how to swaddle her and soothe her when she cried. Each evening he brought home dinner and we ate together at the small table in the kitchen. He told me he'd enrolled in a parenting class starting next month and asked if I thought it would help. I said I believed he had the capacity to learn if he wanted it badly enough. We spoke about custody and support only once, agreeing that our priority was creating a stable environment for Lily rather than litigating feelings. The walls of our home felt warmer now, filled with the hum of small routines and shared responsibility. One afternoon I caught him singing to Lily as she drifted off to sleep. His voice was halting but steady, and that moment felt like a mirror reflecting how much could change when people chose to show up. I watched through the doorway as Lily curled against his chest, her tiny hand resting on his collar. In that quiet scene I felt the full echo of our journey from the cement cracks of that parking deck to the soft light of this living room. It had taken fear and anger and heartache to reach this fragile balance, but we were here, shaping a new story together. I closed the door softly, letting them have that moment without me interrupting. Looking back, I know history will remember Lily's birth not for the abandoned fiancé or the bachelor party spectacle but for the moment a mother and father chose to rebuild from the ashes of their mistakes. It will be remembered as the day our daughter became the catalyst for change, teaching both of us what family truly demands. In the years to come she'll read this story and understand that love is more than instinct, it's a decision we make every morning as the light filters through the blinds and a new day beckons. And I believe history will honor the small revolutions that happen behind closed doors, where ordinary people learn to be extraordinary.